Hello and welcome to our UFC 263 post show. I'm John Pollock, joined as always by Phil Chertok, who is here with us to share all of his thoughts, all of his knowledge, and even a little bit of wisdom. Hello, Phil.
Hi, John. It's a pleasure to talk to you two times in 1 week.
Well, you know what? You can never have enough of John Pollock in 1 week, can you?
I totally agree. I definitely don't get enough. I mean,
There's
John,
definitely a limit. There's definitely a limit, as many listeners I'm sure can attest to. But tonight, or should I say this morning, we are coming at you at the bright hour of 1:30 a.m. Eastern time, Phil, because tonight we got an unexpected special because we got two championship fights and a 5-round fight. Why? Just cuz. But to their credit, also provided one of the most exciting moments, maybe of the year, in the closing seconds of Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards. So I'm not going to complain about that fight being 5 rounds, given that 60 seconds we got at the end.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a fight of the night. The star power of Nate Diaz was on full display throughout the whole fight and his post-fight speech. But we'll get to that a little bit later.
This was a really interesting card when we were going into it. I mean, we had two championship rematches that I found to be interesting in their own ways. I think that with Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori, I think that it was, this was not, I think, the middleweight title fight that if you were looking at that 185-pound division would be your first candidate to be fighting Israel Adesanya. But nonetheless, I thought they did actually a terrific job at the press conference in getting that last minute buzz. And for the flyweight fight, Phil, I think anyone that had bought that fight back in December was sold instantly on the promise of a rematch.
Absolutely. And we already mentioned the star power of Nate Diaz being a draw here. I think there was quite a bit of pent-up demand. It had been quite a few weeks since the last pay-per-view, and there was a gap where there was no MMA events on at all. So I think there was a lot of anticipation and star power to make this a very successful event.
Unless everyone had only so much money budgeted this month and they blew it last Sunday night.
It's a fair question, but it doesn't seem like it. Just seems like people's pockets are endless with these things because there's a new event every week to take at least $50 out of your pocket, and there seems to be millions of people willing to pay it.
Well, I certainly would be looking at this card as the more value for your dollar, but who am I to say? But no, I think that this card, it'll be interesting what the number does, because I think Adesanya has now been able to establish himself as a pretty significant deal. And when you couple that with Nate Diaz, this one, it will be very interesting what the number is, like what the appetite was for a card. Also at a time when, the big show is coming next month. But this one, you had two big stars on this particular card.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, not the extreme
not marquee
barometer.
fights, I would say. I wouldn't say like it's like I don't think they had opponents that are necessarily going to be reaching out to that viewer that's maybe buying two cards a year. I don't know. It really was on the back of, one side of the bracket for each fight.
Yeah, and Israel Adesanya, his star is still building. Of course, coming off of a loss, how much does that affect you? But sometimes that brings even more intrigue. How is the champion going to respond after his first setback? And the unofficial barometer of pay-per-view success is the Discord, and it was very active tonight. I mean, there was a lot of people there, a lot of new people. We were honored with a few appearances by Joe Poe himself.
Yeah, I know it's I try to make my cameos here and there.
They're perfect. It's the perfect touch, John.
Well, let's get into UFC 263 from Glendale, Arizona, which, I mean, this is more than, well, this was a trivia answer. The fact that the very first fight between Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori taking place in this very same arena back in April of 2018 We fast forward though, three years and 2 months later, and I thought this was a shutout by Israel Adesanya. Marvin Vettori, number one, his just physical appearance in this fight, Phil. Like he came in and this guy looked like he was auditioning for the light heavyweight division. And they kind of speculated on the broadcast, like, was this Marvin Vettori looking at Jan Blachowicz and what success he was able to have with Adesanya? I would counter that thinking that, Israel Adesanya, yes, was taking on a much larger opponent in Jan Blachowicz, but that also required Israel Adesanya, I think, to not drastically increase his size, but I think you had to somewhat substitute a bit of your speed going up to fight Jan Blachowicz. And this to me was, Adesanya that was largely fresh for 5 rounds, and Marvin Vettori, who just tired very early on in this fight and was very limited in his strategy that was, figured out pretty easily by Adesanya. And that's what we got for 5 rounds.
Yeah, Adesanya came in a little bit light.
He was 183 and a half, well under the limit.
So, well, look, if you think about the lessons from the first fight and even his last fight with Jan, he got a little bit tired in that one. And I think it was clear that cardio was a big factor for him in this one. And he was fresh throughout, as you already mentioned.
So, I mean, with Marvin Vettori, if you had watched the first fight, it's the 3rd round he has his success. That's the round he clearly wins. And it was off of the takedowns he was able to get. And it seemed to be a strategy of threaten Adesanya with these takedowns, which you could clearly see the evidence of Adesanya's preparation for this, probably expedited by the lack of success he had with Blachowicz. And I thought Adesanya, he was taken down in this fight, but he was able to show some great reversals, and they were never a big issue in this fight. And it just seemed like Vettori, that was sort of the bread and butter here. Like he got his strikes in, but at the same time left his legs open for 25 minutes that got lit up by Adesanya, who was the quicker of the two, just so much more dynamic. He was routinely throwing front kicks, landed several head kicks at varying degrees of significance. And perhaps like the harshest critic of Marvin Vettori was Rafael Cordeiro in his corner, that after each round was informing his fighter, you are not winning this fight. You did not win that last round. And the speech that he gave in between rounds 4 and 5 was, I mean, it was the most impassioned plea of, listen, this is your last chance to finish this fight and do what you feel you can do. Get this motherfucker out. And Marvin Vettori could not. I had 50-45 scorecard for Adesanya. Did you see any round for Marvin Vettori?
I wavered on the first round a little bit. And I gotta say, I hadn't decided, and you cut to the corner and Cordero was already so pissed off that it made me type in Izzy. But I thought that one was, Vettori did okay. He had some shots to the body, and he wasn't getting pieced up like would happen throughout the later rounds. So that one was the closest. I still am fine with giving it to Izzy because he was more active than Vettori in that round.
Yeah, that was a round that Vettori certainly landed his fair share of shots in. I gave Adesanya the round based on the leg kicks, and then he finished the round with an uppercut. But then it just seemed to be Vettori. It was, you can see when guys come in, and this was similar with Demian Maia, that Demian Maia had a clear, in his mind, path to victory, and it was built around getting Belal Muhammad onto his back. And when that fails, you have one of two options. You can either change your game plan and realize, okay, I need to find path B, C, or D, or I can just keep trying over and over and over again until plan A, I can force it. And what happens is you tire yourself by repeating this, and your opponent is just gaining that much more confidence by stopping all of these takedowns and is wearing you down in the process. I thought that was the case here with Marvin Vettori, and this was a fight that as well saw several fouls by Adesanya in the third round, both an eye poke and kicked him low. But I mean, that gave a bit of a reprieve for Vettori to kind of get his win back. But this was, a very solid performance from Adesanya. I would say it kind of erases the memory of Blachowicz. I think this gets him back on track at 185 pounds, and not the most exciting fight in the world, but a pretty solid win by Israel Adesanya, which made it even more comical, Phil, after when Adesanya conveyed to Joe Rogan that Vettori, after this fight, still believes he won. So, I mean, you cannot knock the guy's self-confidence.
Well, I think you can in this case because it's as Anik pointed out, it's not borderline delusional, it's delusional. There's no rational way that you can look at this and say that he won. Your coach was telling you throughout the fight that you were losing. And then at one point, I think it was in the second round, Cordero was like yelling at him. And then like Vettori goes to another coach and like, is he telling the truth? Is he saying, is that for real? And the other coach is, yes, you're losing. Yes, get on track. But he couldn't figure it out.
Maybe Marvin Vettori could go work with Mike Perry, and then we could get the corner advice or the team of Vettori and Vettori.
That would be more entertaining than his performance tonight. So sure, yeah, let's book it.
That was the fight. 50-45, 50-45, 50-45 for Israel Adesanya. After the fight, he was asked, first of all, he dedicated this fight to his teammate at City Kickboxing that was recently killed. Brad Riddell also brought him up. He put the belt down. It was a pretty emotional speech he was giving. But then he kind of shifted back to business and was asked what he wants to do next. And he wants to fight Robert Whittaker again, but wants to do it in Auckland, New Zealand, and they're going to do it on his time because he's the motherfucking king.
Well, I mean, he may have to, negotiate something with the government of New Zealand, who may have something to say about that. So it might be on their timeline as well. But look, if the COVID situation can clear up within a reasonable amount of time, 6 months or so, then yeah, do that fight there. But if not, like, why delay? I mean, unless, of course, it's easier said than done with 2-week quarantines and the like. So, but I think it's the only fight to make in the division. So it might be one that you do in Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, with everything opening up, you have to imagine, Phil, that places like Vegas, for instance, I mean, they're going to be starved for live entertainment, and I think they're going to go very aggressive after big events, and I think the UFC certainly qualifies as that, it sounds nice to go to Auckland, but I mean, there's just so many other financial considerations. Like, there's a reason your largest fights go to Vegas, so I could certainly see them making it worth their while that they stay here and do that fight somewhere in the US.
Yeah,
but we'll see. It'd be a cool scene to do it in New Zealand. Like, I'd love to see them do it. But for all the reasons outlined, that could be tough. But for Adesanya too, I mean, he mentioned here he wants to do it on his timeline. Like, this guy has just gone through like the Paulo Costa fight was only September, and then you're throwing in going up to 205 to fight Blachowicz back in March. This fight was a pretty quick turnaround. This guy has earned a break, I think, if you want to kind of put the title on ice till the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think that was almost something he was implying there as well. It's like, look, I'm going to go back home. That's what he's going to do for a while. So. And as you said, he earned it with a really great performance and just being active as champion and contender in light heavyweight. So, yeah, good on him. And maybe by the end of the year, we can see him return.
Our second championship rematch was Deiveson Figueiredo defending the Flyweight Championship against Brandon Moreno. They fought to a majority draw last December. It was a point deduction to Figueiredo that, if that point deduction had not been in there, he would have retained the title that night. But both had extremely fast turnarounds from their previous fights. Figueiredo defends the title in November and comes back 3 weeks later to defend it against Moreno. For this fight, though, Brandon Moreno came out, and this was such an incredible performance from Brandon Moreno. He is bringing the fight immediately and is dictating the fight with his striking, drops Figueiredo with a jab in the opening round and takes that round. In the second, there's a brief body lock takedown by Figueiredo, and he's just holding as the crowd is getting very restless here. But Moreno is able to escape a guillotine attempt, and he gets his own takedown after a fence grab by Figueiredo, still gets him down. And Figueiredo reverses to his guard, and he's working on top for the rest of the round, while Figueiredo is landing some elbows from bottom. But I thought another Moreno round. I think some people were going back and forth with this one. Didn't really matter because in the third, we got a conclusive finish as Moreno got a takedown. This was such a slick takedown and back take by Moreno as he got the body triangle applied. Looked great. And then locks in a rear naked choke, and it is deep as Figueiredo taps at 2 minutes and 26 seconds of round number 3. What an unbelievable scene this was. And I can't help but imagine, had this fight happened any earlier this year, like, can you imagine this whole thing happening, Phil? This title win, this speech afterward in the apex with nobody. It's crazy to think about. Like this to me was like an all-time memorable moment in UFC history. Like this, it was I'm not going to call it like a giant upset. I think people gave Brandon Moreno like a credible chance in this fight, but they have a potential flyweight superstar that I don't think they've ever had at this division, Henry Cejudo included, especially in Mexico. We'll see if Brandon Moreno can kind of become a star in the US, but this felt like the launching pad of just this giant figure at flyweight who came off as such a charismatic individual, and this was a hell of a win over many people's fight of the year last year.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said, I echo the performance was outstanding. I mean, you kind of got to talk about Deiveson Figueiredo not showing up here as well. Like it was, the volume was not there at all in the first round. He gave up his top position very easily. He had such trouble making weight. He's had such trouble making weight in the past. You have to wonder what was going on with him outside of the cage. But I don't want to take away from Moreno, who, as you mentioned, along with an amazing performance during the fight, his post-fight speech was so incredible, so impassioned.
It was amazing.
And yeah, I mean, there was people, mentioning how they started crying because they were so moved by it, and you can totally see it. And yeah, having the first Mexican-born champion is an incredible opportunity for the UFC, and especially one who's so exciting in the cage and great on the mic as well.
Yeah, it was very evident at the press conference on Thursday how popular Brandon Moreno was, and at a point, Dana White even jumped in and said, if you win on Saturday, you are going to blow up in Mexico. This is one, Phil, where, again, like the situation with the pandemic might postpone this from happening. This is someone that I would absolutely want to have his next title defense happen in Mexico. That's been a market that the company has gone after for so long, and they went so aggressively with Cain Velasquez, but they have never been able to tap into that market, I think, to their expectation level. They have someone in Brandon Moreno that I think that they do have that key to that Mexican market now. And I mean, it was just an unbelievable presentation here, and quite the story with Brandon Moreno if you trace back his roots to The Ultimate Fighter, where he was the last pick on that flyweight season. He was like the 16th seed in the tournament and gets beat by Alexandre Pantoja. And here he is, the flyweight champion 5 years later. It's a remarkable story from a guy that briefly left the company, then came back, and just such a super charismatic individual. He's a broadcaster for the company. Like you could not position someone that the UFC is more just ecstatic about, that this is now the face of our division that at one point they were looking to shelve. And now they might have something extremely successful, especially when it comes to the Mexican market.
Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity, and he's so young. And all those reasons you mentioned, his broadcasting skills. Just sort of thinking off the top of my head, if the COVID situation doesn't allow for an event, Texas is a great place to have Mexican fighters. Dallas Cowboys Stadium would be an incredible place. Obviously, he couldn't headline that, but his presence on a card at that venue would definitely enhance the show. So something like that, I could definitely see being materialized sooner rather than later. But of course, doing a big event in Mexico City with a Mexican star is something that the UFC is definitely dreamed about for a while. And this is the best candidate to date.
It feels like it's the most marketing potential they have ever had in a flyweight champion, as this division is almost 9 years old.
Yeah, it's sort of accelerated. I mean, we said it was like, first it was Cejudo. I mean, it was this weird gimmick, but this Olympic champion, and then Figueiredo comes out and he's so exciting, and they have these incredible fights, and now we have Moreno. It's like the division has really ascended when it was on death's door. So it's pretty incredible how quickly that turned around.
They were discussing the idea of these two flyweights that they could still meet a third time down the road. I guess the question will be, Figueiredo is, now that he is no longer champion, how bad is this weight cut for him? And does he start eyeing bantamweight? And that may also be contingent on, for Brendan Moreno, for his first title defense. Like, yes, you have someone in Askar Askarov that would be, from what he has amassed, could deserve a title opportunity. But a third fight for Figueiredo, they might look at as like the most sellable fight that we have at 125 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on how sellable that is. I mean, there's also something to be said about building your champion. Now, Askar Askarov is no easy opponent, so it's not a gimme fight by any stretch of the imagination. It's hard to see another match here when Figueiredo technically hasn't won either of their two fights. So our immediate rematch. I mean, hey, Henry Cejudo was in attendance. I mean, what if he decided to make? I
thought of that one too. Like if Cejudo came back, you do have, like, Cejudo versus Brandon Moreno is about as big a flyweight fight as you could put together.
I agree. I'm not sure though that if Cejudo comes back, he would do it at flyweight, and even if it's a big fight, like it sounded like that. It really was a tough weight cut, the last one he did for the Dillashaw fight.
It's a difficult weight class when you look at the names that are available. Like, there's a lot of great talent, but I mean, just not there are not stars until now with this potential of Brandon Moreno. So that, like, it feels like somebody that could be a very big deal. And how big it is, part of that is having the fight to sell to people as well. So that will be very interesting. But it's an outcome that I think it greatly moves the flyweight division forward. And I think if, it was not that long ago we were looking at the prospect of this flyweight division being dropped. I think it's never been on more solid footing than it is now.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, last year, fight of the year, a new exciting champion in what might go down as promo of the year. So yeah, only things are looking up.
Leon Edwards versus the returning Nate Diaz, his first fight since fighting Jorge Masvidal all the way back in November of 2019. This is a special non-title 5-round fight. The first time that we've had a 5-round fight that is not a title fight nor a main event in the UFC. So an interesting distinction there. And I mean, this fight, it kind of showed you this fight, if you were to watch it from start to finish and you didn't understand the appeal of the Diaz brothers, this fight will explain it all to you. Nate Diaz lost 24 out of 25 minutes, but that 60 seconds gave this fan base so much hope that this guy will be able to come back and fight for as long as he wants, and it will still be a big deal. It was really, like, remarkable to watch this, because I mean, this was to me, Phil, like Leon Edwards was just at another level and rightfully so, deserved to win this fight. But boy, was he in deep trouble in those final 60 seconds.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it looked like it was going to go the other way. It looked like Nate was about to steal this fight. It didn't happen, to the chagrin of the fans. Edwards was able to hang on.
It might literally have like blown the roof off of this place. Like this crowd, Nate Diaz was the biggest star on this show, with due respect to Adesanya, anybody. It was that Nate Diaz was on another level than anybody.
Yes. Now, I will say maybe it was a little harsh to say he lost 24 minutes. I mean, he lost every round other than the fifth, but I did think he had moments in rounds here or there. He was able to land some shots, play with, do some of his taunting, land at weird angles. He had more variety.
Has he introduced a new technique where you turn your body and just hunch over to try and lure your opponent in? Is this going to be what is now taught by Greg Jackson and Javier Mendez and Eugene Behrman? Is this going to be the new technique we see? Forget these low calf kicks. We've got something better. This distraction method.
Well, I mean, look, if you're just trying to get the crowd reaction, then maybe we will see it from some fighters. Maybe we'll see more on WWE programming before we see it from a high level fighter. But it was part of the charm, right? It was part of the show that he was putting on. I think a lot of that stuff early is the Diaz brothers getting rid of nerves. You remember when Nick fought Anderson, and then he laid down like immediately,
just laid right down on the
like that, I think that's just getting rid of nerves and trying to just, you're in a fight, right? And the Diaz brothers fight best into the fight. And I think so that's what he was sort of trying to do to get in there. But
I was concerned midway through the fight that he was going to be losing the nerves in his lead leg because they were getting brutalized. Yeah,
there was a couple of there was one really bad one that looked like it was gonna like permanently hurt him, but he was able to continue to press forward. I mean, it's unbelievable the will that he has. Now, and I should say, we spent all this time talking about Diaz, but it really was a tremendous performance by Leon Edwards. And it's so unfortunate that the last minute is what a lot of people are going to remember, because it should be setting him up for his title shot. But it sort of feels like a little bit of air in the title tires got deflated there.
I think that point is perfect, Phil. I think that's the story of this fight, is that coming out of it, everyone was focused on Nate Diaz and no one was thinking about the winner, Leon Edwards. And I think that summarizes it perfectly. Like, I do think, like, listen, Leon Edwards had a great fight. This guy is technically, like, you just watch him. He does things at such a high level that he just does everything right. He's got a terrific, like, his striking. He is ready for anything that Nate Diaz was coming at him. He had his timing down. Like, this was just a great performance from Leon Edwards, and it's not going to get the attention, I think, because of this this final round, because that was like the most exciting portion of this. But I mean, I gave Edwards all 4 rounds to start, which I think most did. And at the start of this fifth, Diaz's leg is just totally red, and then suddenly rocks him with this left hand. And there's times when someone gets wobbled. Like, this was Leon Edwards. Dude, this guy was on ice skates, and he was about to just plummet to the mat. This place is going insane as they believe Nate Diaz might actually finish this fight. But he was going against the clock here, and Edwards was able to survive those final 60 seconds. So Diaz was able to win this round, and I think most scored it 49-46. But you're right, Phil. I thought that the final minute, it probably undercut the entirety of the performance by Leon Edwards. And I think the unintentional winner of this fight was Colby Covington.
Because that sets him up as the one that, I mean,
if you're Dana White and you were,
yes.
Dana was publicly pushing, he wants Usman and Covington. I think his decision was I think he only doubles down on that path because of, this was a performance that it was a very strong one, but I mean, coming out of it, I think honestly, if you were to poll people at the end, who would you rather see get a championship fight after this one? You would have people voting for Nate Diaz over Leon Edwards.
I don't disagree. You might have some people say they want to see Floyd Mayweather get a title shot too, but I just mean the numbers. Fans, the countless people. There's a ton of Nate Diaz fans who aren't necessarily regular UFC fans who want him to fight for the heavyweight title. But no, you're absolutely right. The only saving grace that there could be for Edwards is maybe this event is just really successful and there's just enough eyeballs on it that the UFC thinks he got enough rub that they can put him in the title fight.
Yeah, possible. I mean, it should go down as like a really, good win for Leon Edwards. He's now, he extends his unbeaten streak now to, 10 fights, including that no contest with Belal Muhammad. I mean, statistically, this guy should be fighting for a title. I just don't know if this is going to, this to me was not the performance that is going to make it undeniable that you have to go with this guy. He's just someone that finds himself, I think, in a difficult position that's going to have to work so much harder than anyone else to get that eventual title fight. And man, would I have loved to have seen a camera on Kamaru Usman for those final 60 seconds of this fight, because I guarantee you this guy was praying for a Nate Diaz come from behind victory at the end. It was looking very green for a moment for him, and I don't mean the Nigerian flag that was nearby. But in the end, Edwards gets it. It's so tough to deny him. I mean, maybe he just needs to stay ready and take a late replacement fight. Maybe that's the only way he's going to get a title shot, Demian Maia style. I don't know. Yeah, those are your candidates. It's Covington and Edwards. With Nate Diaz,
one Eryk Marcotte would like to chime in and suggest that perhaps if Stephen Thompson has a strong performance against Gilbert Burns on the Conor card, it's another potential title fight that they could do.
Stephen Thompson is the other candidate that I think could find his way in there. I think that just comes down to the timeline and if it works out. I mean, he's fighting in 4 weeks, so in theory, his name could definitely be in the mix as well there. So those are kind of the three you would be looking at for Nate Diaz. Do you look like you should look on paper? You should take away from this that, Leon Edwards was just in a different league than Nate Diaz. And I think anyone watching that would not care that Nate Diaz, if they announce a big fight for him at lightweight, which is a division he can go back to, or if he stays at welterweight, there's going to be such an enormous interest in Nate Diaz. All people are only going to remember those 60 seconds if you are a Nate Diaz supporter, and you don't have to think about the 4 rounds he lost before it.
Yeah, as I mentioned, he's got his own group of fans that are independent of the sport of MMA, and they're super loyal to him, and they will watch him fight anyone. Maybe this is an opportunity after a break to do the Masvidal rematch, since Masvidal's coming off a loss. That's a thought. It's a pretty big fight, even though Masvidal's probably lost some star power. There's still always big fights for him. There's eventually the Conor fight. Poirier at some point would be a good fight because they have a history together. So there will continue to be big fights for Nate Diaz, and I'll get excited for them. I was really excited for this. I was happy to see him. I enjoyed the whole fight. I'm pretty sure it'll be fight of the night. I hope it's not. It reminded me today. I was like, we don't get this too often. I was like, there's a limited amount of Diaz brother performances that we're going to get in our life. And so I was very thankful. I don't know why I thought of that today, but I was very thankful that we got it.
Well, yeah, there's no guarantee he's going to do some turnaround. You got the 2 fights in 2019 and then didn't fight for a year and a half. So, with Nick, it's like, I'll believe it when I see it of him coming back. It seems to be there's a lot of optimism he's going to come back, but that's, it'll be the same thing. I think I think it'll be even more pronounced with Nick that there's going to be a giant interest to see him come back, but I think it'll be quite the reality check of where the sport is now, and where Nick Diaz is, this guy who does not actually have a win since BJ Penn.
I mean, again, clearly there the matchup is what makes the most sense, and I think the name Robbie Lawler just springs to mind. Robbie Lawler springs to mind. If I'm going to put Nick Diaz in there, that was a classic fight, and I think he's on the tail end of his career. I think that would be a good one of the best of the bunch, I guess.
It's just rare UFC does that type of matchmaking because it's like, where do you go with that? I mean,
yeah.
Nick disappears or Robbie Lawler. I mean, it's just so much in the UFC that it's, well, you take the winner and we move forward with them. And Diaz and Lawler, it's just like, it's a one night fight and not much or any long-term benefit to that.
But if you're the UFC, so I guess, look, most likely you're the UFC, you're going to assume you're only going to get one fight out of Nick Diaz anyway, right? No matter what your contract is, because it's just, it's been so long. So you treat it as such. And I do understand you want to make a name theoretically, maybe, but if because he has the potential maybe to be such a draw, then maybe it's worth it to do one big event on pay-per-view. If he can do 1 million buys or something, with other support on the card, it might be worth it to do that one-time shebang.
Next was Belal Muhammad and Demian Maia. Demian Maia, his 33rd UFC fight. He has hinted that this could be his last fight, but not officially stated as such. And, I thought he came out in the first round. The first was the closest of the 3 rounds. We had Maia, standing with him and got his lone takedown in the fight. But then he would try 20 more takedowns and Belal Muhammad would stop all of them. And it just seemed that Demian Maia, by the end of this fight, was just a man that he was extremely exhausted from trying all of these takedowns. And Muhammad just got stronger as the rounds continued. He found his rhythm in the second with his strikes, and the crowd would boo as Maia continually went for these single legs, and Muhammad would punish him with elbows to the side of the head. In the third, more of Muhammad's strikes. He defended the single legs pretty effectively and was just timing as Maia would enter and pay for it each time. Muhammad would shift his stance, and he's just piling up strikes. And this, to me, was just a story, Phil, of Demian Maia knew he had to get this guy to the ground, and he couldn't. He succeeded once and could never get him back down. And there was not much of an ability to shift on the fly. And Muhammad, I scored this one 29-28.
Oh, well, you were more generous than me. I scored it 30-27. I was actually pretty surprised that 2 judges gave Maia the first round. But nonetheless, yeah, not another tough performance from Maia, who at 43, going up against top 15 guys. I mean, yeah, he can hang in there, and I'm glad he didn't get knocked out, Gilbert Burns style. But you have to really ask, what's the point of continuing at this? Other than the financial incentive, which, hey, that's fine. But from a competitive standpoint, for a world champion in jiu-jitsu, and second all time in wins in the UFC, second all time in submissions, I believe. It would be nice to see him go out, against a top guy who he lost to in a tough fight. I think it would be perfectly fine to go out that way, because I don't really see much more that you can do with him in the UFC. Because I think he could probably still beat some up and coming guys, right? His jiu-jitsu is going to be that good.
Yeah, I agree with you. His age is, people are going to look at that number, but I'm with you. I think there's many fighters that are not going to have that takedown defense of a Belal Muhammad. But I mean, this was a clear discrepancy in where these two fighters are at their respective careers, and I don't see it getting much better for Demian Maia as you continue down this path. He's had a very successful UFC run. The fact that he won those 3 fights in a row prior to the Gilbert Burns loss. I mean, again, we talked about it on the preview show. Like, he now has 11 losses, but it's a glaring number. But when you look at who those 11 names are, it's pretty elite company, pretty solid names that he has lost to. And to me, again, if you're not looking financially, to me, this would have been the sign that you go back and you look at and just be, I am not at the same level I was before, and you call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, I just flashed the logo on my t-shirt. This is a Demian Maia t-shirt. I got this at a Demian Maia seminar in London, Ontario, 2 days. Tremendous coach. He was the only person there. There was 100-something people. Gave everybody terrific attention, terrific instruction, tools I still use to this day. He was, he was kind of the jiu-jitsu god in MMA when I started doing jiu-jitsu, and I followed his career ever since. He's definitely been one of my favorite fighters, and I can say, I think, clear-headedly, despite my bias there, that he is a UFC Hall of Famer, and I look forward to that happening, and I do hope he can sort of call it a career gracefully here.
Frank Mir had quite the comment tonight. He said he believes Demian Maia is the best BJJ practitioner to ever compete in MMA. That's no slight praise from Frank Mir.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and Frank Mir will be a subject in the next fight, actually. Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I mean, obviously, we've had Jacare Souza, and we've had Fabricio Verdum and other great competitors, but the success that Demian Maia had, not only in jiu-jitsu competition, but in MMA, having that record at one time for the most submission wins in the UFC, the toughest of the tough, I think does establish him as the biggest BJJ player in MMA history. But I would love to hear some other people's thoughts on that, because I'm sure there would be a good argument for some others.
So the Flyweight Championship fight provided our feel-good moment of the night. The pay-per-view opener in the light heavyweight division provided our feel-awful moment of the night as Paul Craig took on Jamahal Hill. And Craig, early on, pulls guard, and he's got the arm of Hill trapped. And he's trying to just wrench on this arm. He's able to sweep to an arm bar, and from there get a triangle. And he has got this arm locked, and you see it just twist and contort, and he's drilling strikes. Hill's got his arm trapped, and you can see him signaling to the referee. This is an Arizona-based referee named Al Guinea, and
who looks an awfully lot like Abe Vigoda. Did you notice that?
I guess so, yes. And Hill is trying to signal to the referee, and this goes on. Sometimes you will see a fight that you'll say afterwards when a guy's eating strikes, that probably went like 5 or 6 seconds too long. This one probably went about 20 seconds too long. And 20 seconds when you have a submission fighter the level of a Paul Craig and what he can do to your arm may as well be an hour for the common person. He finishes this. It's actually ruled a TKO. And you can see instantly, Jamahal Hill has absolutely no use of his arm. It's just limp. It's just attached to his body. And he has no power to even lift this arm. It looks brutal. Later, there was an update that he suffered a dislocated elbow per his manager. But this was... John McCarthy was very upset about this and speaking about the fact that, was this the best referee you had to put in this situation? And when you go to different states, that local officials get these big time opportunities. And Al Guinea is someone that the UFC has used in the past when they go to Arizona, but he got a lot of criticism for this because, I mean, you're talking about a guy's well-being here, and this was a very, very horrifying scene with this arm.
I mean, it was just so clear as day. You're just like wondering what he's looking at. And I mean, he even looked like he was kind of tapping at points. Is like what are you watching?
He was definitely like signaling and doing the best he could because his arm was literally trapped. He could not tap with that arm. And it's just, I mean, you can make the comparison. Like there was a very famous fight back in 2004 where we got a similar situation.
Which one am I talking?
You said you were going to mention Frank Mir in the next fight. I assume we're on the same wavelength.
No, so that's actually not the Frank Mir reference that I was referring to. But
I thought that's where you were going with Sylvia.
No,
that's what I thought of.
Yeah, so to conclude your story, or maybe you should conclude that one, and then I'll fill you in on what my Frank Mir reference was.
Well, this was the heavyweight title fight between Tim Sylvia and Frank Mir, and Mir has the armbar, and all of a sudden Herb Dean stops the fight, and you've got Tim Sylvia he's pissed. The crowd thinks this is an early stoppage, and then one of the most famous replays in UFC history, they show it in slow motion, and you actually see the arm of Tim Sylvia snap. So if anything, Herb Dean stopped it a second or two late, but he instantly identified it and stopped the fight. And then everyone calmed down and realized, oh, definitely not a late stoppage at all.
No, not at all. Especially when Sylvia's arm was dangling there for the post
and wanted the fight to restart. That's what he was trying to get. He was trying to get them to restart the fight because he was. I mean, it tells you like the adrenaline level of these fighters and having referees that are in there and understanding of a situation like that. I mean, I don't want to pile on with this referee. I mean, human error is going to happen, but this was bad.
Yeah, absolutely. In regards to my Frank Mir reference, it was really to Paul Craig. So that arm wrench that he was using, it would look like what has been called a Mir lock, which is Frank Mir was the only person to get that submission in UFC history. And so Craig would wrench on the arm, and it would force Jamahal Hill to roll in a certain direction. And then Craig tried the armbar the first time, and Hill was able to escape. But then when it returned back to that same position, Craig used the same arm wrench Mir lock to force him to roll. But this time he was ready with the armbar, caught him, and that's what just annihilated the arm. So really impressive jiu-jitsu from Craig, who was intentionally chaining things together. That was clearly a move he works. He works that arm lock into a roll, into an armbar, and it worked perfectly for him. Great stuff.
It was very impressive work by Paul Craig, just kind of overshadowed with the effects of it. But Craig is now quietly unbeaten in his last 5 fights. He's coming off that TKO win over Shogun Rua, and he's 33 years old, which is not super old in the light heavyweight division, but I mean he's putting together like a nice run for himself.
Yeah, and I mean, even in his striking, it's improving. He's never going to be a super fluid striker, but it's less awkward than it was previously. And this is a division that's light on talent. So, and he's a pretty exciting guy. I mean, they put him on pay-per-views. So I definitely see him accelerating with a pretty substantial name next.
They actually had the two stand with the referee for the reading of the decision. And dude, like Jamahal Hill's arm is just like, get this man out of the octagon ASAP. It was just brutal. Like you could see his arm just looked mangled.
Yeah. It was disturbing. And, spare yourself the footage. You don't need to see that.
Let's chat quickly about. I got to see the televised prelims, but I did not see the early prelims.
Well, congratulations, because I'll tell you.
Tonight we had 9 undercard fights, 8 of which went to the decision. Although in there we had, from my money, Phil, was the fight of the night, and that was Brad Riddell and Drew Dober.
That was a great fight. Yeah, that the night was moving at not a great pace. But thankfully, Riddell and Dober delivered. I mean, how could they not? We knew this was going to be a really good fight going into it. And yeah, super exciting. Dober looked really good in the first, but then Riddell took over. And yeah, very entertaining fight. Riddell, I mean, Dober's no slouch. So Riddell made a name for himself here. And I expect to see him fight somebody pretty strong next.
Yeah, I mean, Drew Dober, I mean, God, this emphasizes like the depth of that lightweight division. He's coming off that loss to Islam Makhachev, and then his rebound is Brad Riddell. Like that is the depth you're looking at lightweight. And Drew Dober like is a quality lightweight. But nonetheless, I thought this honestly, like I thought this was like on, I wouldn't say like fight of the year, but I would put it like up there. I thought this was just an excellent fight between these two. Phil probably had the same card as me. I thought Dober won the first, but it was Riddell winning the second, and certainly the third, where he blasted Dober and he was hurt. It was pretty clear cut, the scoring of this one, as Riddell got the 29-28 scorecards. Then we had maybe another of the year award, but it might not be for anything that starts with best. That was Eryk Anders against Darren Stewart. Now, to be fair, the third round was a good round. The first two were brutal. This was terrible. I thought they split rounds. Anders winning the second and the third. He came alive in the third round, so they at least had an entertaining end to this fight. But the first 10 minutes of this fight was clinch city, and it was brutal.
You've said more than enough already.
Eryk Anders wins 29-27 twice, 29-28. Joanne Calderwood and Lauren Murphy. This was an important fight because this could set up the next flyweight contender for Valentina Shevchenko. Others have suggested this could produce the next victory for Valentina Shevchenko. A close fight. You had, man, how did you go in the first round? I thought the first round was very close, and it's probably how you scored this overall fight was how it came down in round one.
I gave this round to Calderwood. I just thought she had more volume, and then the success that Murphy had towards the mid part of the round, Calderwood was able to come back towards the last part. So I gave it to her. I didn't think it was that close personally. Like I kind of thought this was not a great decision, but it wasn't horrible. Like
I had Calderwood winning the first as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I both had the same scores. Murphy dominated the second. She got the takedown and pretty much controlled Calderwood. And the third was an easy Calderwood round. I mean, her striking was great in this final round, like clearly outpacing Lauren Murphy. However, it was a split decision win for Lauren Murphy. So 29-28s get her the win. And I mean, it really it's a numbers game at flyweight. I mean, you can make the argument for Lauren Murphy. She has won 5 in a row, but I mean, all due respect to Lauren Murphy, that is a wide variance of champion versus challenger.
I mean, is it any wider than the other, than Caitlin Chukagian? Or, I mean, and no disrespect to these fighters. It's just Valentina's on another level. And look, but I'm okay. I'm okay with her just, mowing down these girls and making a name for herself and building up more of a resume and forcing people to demand that Amanda Nunes fight. I mean, and hey, Lauren Murphy, you've put together, I didn't give her the W, but 2 judges did, and that's what matters. And, she has put on a streak. She has gotten better, I can definitely say. And look, she deserves a shot like these other.
There's no one else.
Got it,
I mean,
right?
the other fight is like Cynthia Calvillo and Jessica Andrade are fighting in September. So like that's really all you're looking at. So like there's nobody else. It's either you do this Amanda Nunes fight again, or you keep Shevchenko in her division, and it's Lauren Murphy. So I think Lauren Murphy. A lot of people would have thought Joanne Calderwood won this fight, but it's Lauren Murphy that very well could end up with a title fight.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly not going to headline an event, but I look forward to an exciting dance afterwards.
And then the televised prelims opened up with Movsar Evloev defeating Hakeem Dawodu 29-27 on all 3 cards. Evloev just a a much better grappler in the first 2 rounds. The second, I had 10-8. But then Dawodu was able to win the third, stunning him with this left jab and rocked Evloev, who got a takedown. And kind of a bit of a theme of the night, where we got several of these where someone was being dominant and then the final round hit and they ran into some trouble, but they made it to the end.
Yeah, it was a pretty impressive performance by Evloev, and Dawodu, like, he was in tough through those first 2 rounds, but hung in there and started to, land some shots in the third, but ultimately it was more takedowns and pretty clear win. Another decision on this card. But that was an okay fight, despite all things considered. There was some brutal ones before it, and
yeah, so I'll read off the results of the early prelims. We had Carlos Felipe over Jake Collier by split decision, Fares Ziem over Luigi Vendramini by majority decision, Steven Peterson over 21-year-old Chase Hooper by unanimous decision, Terrence McKinney knocked out Matt Favola in 7 seconds, making it not the fastest, but tying it with several other fights for second fastest knockout in UFC history. The others, Phil, that went 7 seconds: Todd Duffy versus Tim Hague, Ryan Jimmo versus Anthony Perosh, and Mark Hominick versus the Korean Zombie Chan Sung Jung at UFC 140 in Toronto.
Oh, look at that. We've got 2 Canadians on that short list.
And then the other fight was Pannie Kianzad over former title challenger Alexis Davis by unanimous decision.
Yeah, you don't need to watch any of the prelims other than the 7 seconds of that knockout, and maybe a few seconds afterwards, because another ridiculous injury after a post-fight celebration.
All right, well, there you go. That was UFC 263. An entertaining card, I would say. Of the main card, I would say, like, there were a lot of great performances, a pretty spectacular moment with Brandon Moreno and Brad Riddell and Drew Dober. I thought that fight was excellent. So those would be my my recommendations. What do you think overall? Final thoughts on the card?
I mean, Nate Diaz, like, the top 3 fights are what saved this card, really. It was not going in a terribly fun direction. Nate Diaz was super exciting. It was great to see him back, as I already mentioned. And then the Brandon Moreno moment alone was incredible. The main event, I mean, it was great to see Izzy showcase his skills and demonstrate that he is the champ, and it's his crown in the middleweight division. But it wasn't the most thrilling of fights, and that's largely because of Vettori and how he approached it. UFC has been on a pretty amazing run of really exciting pay-per-views. This is kind of one that is sort of like, it's okay.
Well, a harsh critic is one Phil Chertok, but that's why you come here, for the honest praise and criticism that comes with every UFC card. Where do you want to transition to now, Phil?
Let's preview what's coming up, and then we'll get out of here, because it's going to be 3 a.m. till we get to sleep, and Daddy needs to go to bed.
Well, we'll make this fairly quick for those that are listening live. So next weekend, we've got the return of Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, who is taking on Dan Ige. 2 weeks from now, it's the it's the card you've been waiting for. It's Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. And the big one, next month, July the 10th, UFC 264. They did run a promo for it tonight. The third fight between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. What else do we have on this card? We have Tai Tuivasa versus Greg Hardy, Stephen Thompson versus Gilbert Burns, Irina Aldana versus Yana Kunitskaya, Sean O'Malley versus Luis Smoka, Kevin Lee versus Sean Brady, Nico Price versus Miguel Pereira, Jessica Ai versus Jennifer Maia, Ryan Hall is fighting, and Carlos Condit versus Max Griffin among the fights on this card.
Yeah, sort of in contrast to some of the ways that the UFC has put together Conor cards, where they've been light and Conor has been the only thing of value, or the main event has been the only thing of value. This looks like a card with a lot to enjoy. So I think it's got the potential to do really well. Historically, they've done big events on that weekend, so or around 4th of July. Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge event. I'm looking forward to it.
Bigger than the January fight? Do you see this one topping it?
Yes, I do. I think. Yeah, I do. Because now
it's around 1.6, I think.
That's what the first one did. Yeah. I mean, I don't see it. I don't know if it's going to do dramatically more, 1.75, 1.8, something like that. There's a lot of factors, the time, like, what's going on that weekend. But I think having these other fights is going to help a little bit. And I'm looking forward to it. Brian Hall, that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight is really exciting. Yeah, so a lot to enjoy and look forward to on that card.
We'll end it off on this. Because everyone is going to talk about what does this mean for Conor McGregor. I think this is a really tall order for Conor McGregor. I do not see. I can't say there is no path to victory for Conor McGregor. There certainly is. I see many, many more ways for Dustin Poirier to win this rematch, and that inevitably is going to lead to, well, what does this mean for Conor McGregor? I think that we can just cut to the chase right now, and I think what you can learn from Nate Diaz tonight, we could probably apply to next month if Conor McGregor gets beaten once again by Dustin Poirier, is that there will still be a gigantic demand to see Conor McGregor fight. And I think tonight you have an opponent that he can easily go to after. Like, are you looking at this as, a career-defining fight for Conor McGregor, that a loss could send him away from the sport? Or like, how significant is this fight for Conor McGregor? Because in the next 4 weeks, we're going to get all the hyperbole that this is the ultimate referendum on Conor McGregor.
Well, I think a victory would establish him as, a championship contender, right? So yes. From a legacy standpoint, look, he's already been the 2-time champ, but as we've mentioned before, he's never defended a UFC title. And he's a student of the game. He knows the history of the game so much. So he wants that accolade. And if he were to lose this fight, it really kind of takes him out of title contention. I don't think it sends him away from the game, though, just based on what, like he said, he'll fight anyone. He'll call out Diego Sanchez for fights. Like, it's ludicrous. So I do think that he will continue to fight after this because he seems to enjoy it. He doesn't, he's getting paid, but he's already got so much money. So he's doing it for something more than just money. And he seems to love the sport and the hoopla and all that. A loss, if he keeps losing, it will take the luster off, and people are gonna stop wanting to see him in main events. But he's an incredibly exciting fighter as well, so that's part of the appeal. It's not just that he's a brash talker. So I think he still has a lot of future to go, even with a loss. I do think it's a tall order, as you say, but look. He was able to correct the mistakes from the first Diaz fight in pretty short time and get a win in the rematch. I wouldn't put it past him to do it here.
Well, that will be our next UFC card. So Saturday night, July the 10th, will be live right after that UFC 264 show. Phil, as always, I want to say thank you, as well as all the people joining us live at this late hour, especially if you're on the East Coast, as we clock in at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time, as we bid everyone a farewell. So, Phil, thank you. And to everybody, we'll speak with you next month, right after UFC 264.